Hello, my name is Jorge Toro and I'm the President and CEO of Readiness. Today I'm bringing you the topic of diversified clinical trial sites for the world, and specifically we're going to talk about recruiting Latinos for US trials. So let's just go right to the matter. First of all, the FDA took a very important step on April 13 to require that racial and ethnic diversity is accounted for in clinical trials right before they get started. So it's important that for those sites that are going to be working on bringing populations in, that they have a diversity plan. Specifically, the issues that brought these to the attention of the FDA is the lack of diversity and inclusion issues that exist for sites, and specifically participation issues. Today we're going to focus on Latino participation, and we're going to give you some tips on how to help this process by identifying, recruiting, returning, and replicating the process for Latino participation. So let's go straight to the matter to help you out with this. So first of all, identifying Latino participants. A key element is to understand very well the ethnicity of the Latino participants that you're working with. Ethnicity in Latinos is diverse in nature. You have Latinos from South America, and specifically for countries like Colombia, Peru, and Argentina, and many others that are completely different in nature. They have different customs, they have different ways of thinking, and the same way you have Latinos from Central America and North America that have ethnicity differences. You have to consider those ethnicities before you start engaging. You also have to keep in mind the socioeconomic status of those Latinos. Are you looking for Latinos that are typically engaged in transient labor? Are you looking for Latinos that are engaged in international commerce, in other types of professions? You have to be clear about who this population is and who is the right population to target when you're talking about identifying this Latino population that you're going to go after. The next step is really recruiting Latinos. Okay, so how do you go about reaching out to those Latinos? If you're talking about the majority of the Latinos in the United States, which is basically Latinos of Mexican origin, you're talking about very specific characteristics that also relate to the use of their media. So if you're trying to reach out to mass media and you're trying to reach out through, let's just say, newspaper ads, you have to understand what papers get to the Latinos. If you're going to use techniques like distributing flyers, you have to identify where are you going to distribute those flyers. If they are those who frequent a church, or those who frequent a community center, or those to go to the Mexican Tejano dances, that is different, and you have to understand who is going to pick up those flyers and how are they going to use it. If you're going to make calls, you have to be aware of schedules. Latinos are very hardworking people that typically work two jobs, work late hours, so the schedules for the calls are different. And now with mobile phones, you have another challenge on the use of calls. Social media is becoming more and more a method of reaching out. There's a lot of Latinos that are involved in social media, involved in Facebook, and I would say that there's something of consideration as well, using media like Facebook. But there's also perhaps the most important of all, which is the opportunity to do personal contact. And I'm not talking about just going knocking door to door to try to reach out for Latinos. Personal contact is involved through leaders, through Latino community leaders who are involved with many other people, and perhaps can provide a reference to the project that you're proposing, to the plan, the opportunity that you're proposing for participating in a clinical trial. So I would recommend that you think about personal contacts as well. If you're reaching to a Latino population that is in a university or a community college, for example, is different than if you're reaching out to again, the Latinos at the dances, and you want the presenter of the dances to be the one that actually leads the awareness campaign, if you would, to reach out. Now, the other thing that happens is you have to think about engaging. So once you reach out, how do you engage these Latino people? They literally, you have to think about references. You have to think about when you are engaging that Latinos are very involved in general, and I don't want to be too broad in the specification, but in general they are very much about referrals. So who referred you to them is important. Who you think could be the one that is working with them. And perhaps in this matter, if you are recruiting Latinos for clinical trials, recruiting Latinos for through your doctor or the doctor's staff is important. Another component that's very significant here in engaging is affinity. Is how much do you know them, how much do you know them through others, through references, how much do you have in common with them so that they feel comfortable engaging in a clinical trial. So this is the components of recruiting that are important to keep in mind. Now, retaining those Latino patients have a lot to do with comfort factors. Latinos are warm people in general. They're very family oriented. They're very much about communities. So their comfort relies a lot on the personal touch, on the fact that there's empathy. If they are Latinos that are participating in a clinical trial because of a condition or because they fit your criteria in a certain way, the empathy is very important. Trust is absolutely basic for establishing a comfort factor, and respect is very much the subject as well. They will run away if you don't express respect and you have in any way crossed the line with them. Familiarity, there's more, so there's a lot of continued participation and building a relationship in the comfort factors that would actually help you retain the Latinos in your studies. Now, the other thing is simply the logistics and the flexibility. You need to really know the population you're working with, and you have to provide for them. There are factors that are very common. For example, Latinos tend to congregate in community. If you're talking mostly about the majority of the Latino labor force, the 80% of the population, those are people that usually run in communities. They share rides to work, so they would need rides to go to a study. They also congregate on certain times in certain places. You have to keep in mind things like where are the abarrotes stores, where are the communities where they gather, the churches. These are places where you can actually get to know more about them, and you have to accommodate the logistics based on their schedules and what they can do. Otherwise, you might not be able to retain them as well. So again, logistics and flexibility are important. Now, replicating this effort for the next study. Once you build a community and you have such a valuable community, because the reality is recruiting Latinos is not an easy task, and the participation is way too low right now. So that's one of the reasons why we're talking today, right? So replicating these efforts once you build a community is a lot about readiness. And I'm going to talk about readiness specifically about hiring bilingual staff, about hiring staff or engaging your staff with training and with acculturation. It's very important that not only a person can communicate with them in Spanish, but they are very empathetic and sympathetic to their needs and to their culture. Remember, there are things to understand like diets, like customs, like music, like likes and dislikes, like ways they come around. Sometimes they will show up with a specific needs that you have to understand and respect. So hiring staff that is very able to empathize with the community is important. Now, the other thing is translating study materials into Spanish. You have to make sure that they will completely understand, and I have to tell you from my own experience, I'm a person who has lived in this country for 30 years, and I speak English the way I speak English and communicate like this, but to this day I still, when somebody's going to talk to me about my health, I'd rather they communicate to me in Spanish. So it's important to have the materials catered to them as much as possible, to have things that are easy for them to understand. These are components of readiness that you have to keep in mind. And then there's the community involvement. If you have good community involvement, if participants in your trials will actually refer more participants, and that could be the whole secret to success, is participant referral. So there is another factor that to me continues to be important, is the doctor's involvement with the community. And we will talk more about that in another subject, but specifically to the patients, there's an important factor in the relationship with the doctors or the leaders or the investigator. So let's just summarize this by saying that recruiting Latinos takes 3 specific factors. In preparing, you have to prepare your staff and you have to prepare your materials. In recruiting, you have to identify the Latino population that you're targeting. You have to engage the Latino population that you're targeting, and you have to join them. You have to be part of them. You have to become part of their daily life so that they can participate properly. And to retain them, you have to treat them well, you have to make it easy for them, and you have to stay engaged with them. That is very important. So to summarize, if you want to have a takeaway for this is the Research Nexo secret to success in clinical trials for recruiting Latinos. Prepare well, recruit well, and retain well. I will now tell you that Research Nexo is an initiative of Readiness that can help the clinical trial community reach out to diversity in clinical trials. But in general, we provide for clinical trial sites all the technology, all the know-how, and the ability to get ready and sustain readiness for clinical trials, to be successful with clinical trials. If you want us to help you, researchnexo.com is the place to go. So please visit us, and thank you so much. If you have any questions, please go to medinexo.com, go to researchnexo.com. Feel free to ask questions, and we will be glad to get back to you with the answers. Thank you and have a great day.